was mucking about with a number of different mates in Edinburgh. One of them, I think the first guy I got together in the shoes was Jim Paterson, and he was a friend of a friend. We'd kind of mucked about in a couple of bands together, and our mate who got that band together had emigrated to Canada. So we were looking to do something different. We were kind of listening to a lot of post-punk stuff. We were into things like Johnny Thunders, the New York Dolls, the Only Ones, you know, so guitar-based stuff with a tune, but a bit of rock and roll. And we met a guy called Craig Smith in response to an advert. I think we put the advert in the window of Ripping Records, handwritten on a scrap of paper. And we were thinking, who are the most classic bands, past and present, that we'd want to combine into a band? And I think we said influences are the Beatles, the Clash, the Stone Roses, REM, and possibly Husker Du, because we were starting to get into that American kind of post-punk hardcore stuff. Maybe that was after Craig had joined us, but we found a singer called Andy Tait, who was from Orkney, and he just happened to be visiting the house. But we then auditioned drummers, and I can't remember how we got in touch, but a guy called Kev Tucker joined us, who was from Midlothian. So the full lineup came together, I think, at the end of '89, and we then started jamming and putting songs together for about the next 6 months before we played a gig. I think it was the only band I've ever been in where 3 people were writing songs. A lot of bands I've been in, and the band I'm in now, it's kind of collaborative. You do a bit of jamming, you record it, you keep one bit, you chuck another bit, put it together. But 3 of us each used to write complete songs, bring them to the band and say, it goes like this. And we'd choose the favourite songs out of all of that. And so that was fun. It was pretty fertile. We never recorded half of the stuff that we actually did together. But I think we did maybe 3 different sessions with Dave Gray out in Pennycook when the Sound Cafe was in his basement. And the first one was probably the spring of 1990. And the last one was about the middle of 91. And the track that's on this record, Home is Where the Heart Lies, is probably the last thing we actually recorded together in the studio. We never thought that it would be, but people's kind of tastes were changing quite fast, and people's social circles were changing quite quickly. Grunge was becoming quite big, and Nirvana were making it. And a couple of us in the band got quite obsessed with wanting to be noisier and grungier. And the rest of the band were a bit like, nah, I'd rather listen to the Jam and be Paul Weller. So that became a source of conflict, which led to a split eventually. But I think it was incredibly productive over that period of time, and really enjoyed it. And I still go back to the stuff now and sometimes listen to it, Band in the early and mid-80s was probably the Smiths. And I thought Johnny Marr was a revelation. He still is my favourite guitarist ever. And, when I learned a huge amount listening to him. And some of that is still, I just think, the best guitar music ever recorded. So the Smiths came and went. I think they split in about 87, didn't they? But by that time, you had REM starting to become quite big, and they were another band that were popular with a lot of mates. Late 60s, Byrds influenced kind of stuff chimed in with the Smiths influence. And then through that, mates of mine were starting to listen to more American music, which we hadn't done for quite a while. And that led into stuff like Husker Du, Dinosaur Jr., the Lemonheads. and those kind of post-hardcore type, slightly. I always thought grunge was a great combination of pop and metal and punk, and I thought it was a great combination because when I grew up I was in my teenage years in the 70s, and it was much more cliquey. I was listening to Led Zeppelin, Hendrix and stuff when I started to learn to play guitar. And suddenly people were getting into punk and saying, that's shite. It's only good if you know 3 chords. And there was a lot of tension there between people that regarded themselves as budding musicians and people that wanted to be in that cooler and more edgy scene. I remember there was an article in the List by Craig McLean or somebody saying, grunge is just a perfect storm of pop, punk and metal. And I thought, you're absolutely right. This is all the stuff I've always been into, and it's combining into one thing. I was in a covers band at school, and after that, my whole thing was just jamming guitar through a WEM Dominator turned up max. You didn't have pedals or gain knobs. You just turned everything on the amp up to max to get that beautiful sustain. And I would just jam for hours in youth clubs and church halls with whatever bass player and drummer I could find. And the stuff we came out with, we'd record on a 1-track cassette player and put songs together that way. So it was just the way that I had always worked. Pleased with that version of the track. We had recorded it before on a demo, but we grunged it up more. You know what it was? I was using a distortion pedal by that time, whereas before I just whacked it into a solid state amp and turned the gain control up. I'd bought an old Marshall Governor. I've still got it upstairs. They're worth quite a lot of cash now. But it was a kind of crunchy overdrive pedal. But again, I just turned everything up on the pedal to make it more fuzzy. And that's the sustained kind of distorted chord you hear at the start of the song. But I thought we played it well. And what you will hear in the lead guitar is the influence of John Perry from The Only Ones. If you're a fan of The Only Ones, you will hear guitar licks there that I've lifted directly from him on stuff like Another Girl, Another Planet. Great guitarist. He's still alive now. I see him on Facebook, and I saw Peter Perrett recently doing a wee tribute to Johnny Thunders on Thunder's birthday. They do this every year, apparently. But these were the guitarists that I kind of stole a lot from in the 70s. Johnny Thunders, Ace Frehley from Kiss, John Perry from The Only Ones, and less kind of fashionably at the time, people like Richie Blackmore, who I remember falling out with him. One of my mates, he was, "Oh, you stole a Richie Blackmore solo," and I said, "I don't play that now, I'm too cool." But I listened to it and I said, "I totally did." I always say, people say, "How do you just improvise and make stuff up as you go along?" You're not really. You're taking bits that you've enjoyed over the years and just in your mind copying and pasting it in a different way to do something different, and everybody does that, don't they? weren't getting gigs when you were starting a band off. You had to literally go with a bag of cassette tapes around pubs and venues, find the guy who ran it, persuade him not to kick you out and say, take this tape. I mean, I remember handing tapes to people and saying, have a listen to that, it's awesome. And they'd look at it and go, throw it over their shoulder. One of them was Evan Dando from the Lemonheads, actually. And it was one of my favourite bands. And I thought, you're not my favourite band now, you twat, throwing my demo over your shoulder. He wasn't interested. He just wanted to know if I had drugs or not. And I didn't, so he didn't want to talk to me. I remember doing everything track by track, which I wouldn't do nowadays. And he was doing it on reel-to-reel tapes. And the drums were first, and we would just be in the control room. I just used to plug my guitar into the mixing desk, do a rough rhythm guitar track, and that was the way we did it. Nowadays with Dave, we'd all be screened off and we'd do it live, apart from vocals, which I kind of prefer, but it did mean that you got every instrument sounding its best and everybody concentrating on their one bit without being distracted by what somebody else was doing. I'm pretty sure I can remember me and the bass player and the singer in the control room with Dave in that basement, and we wanted, our thing at the time was to speed the songs up because we wanted to get thrashier, and the drummer wasn't liking us because he wanted to play a post-punk speed. We were like, we want you to go at the speed of Husker Du, and he didn't want to. So I remember Craig Smith, the bass player, saying, Kev, could you imagine that snare drums in my face? And just hit it a bit harder. And he did, and he delivered a stonking drum track, which was much faster than the first version we recorded.